The world can be cruel to those who live in silence. Most people never notice how much sound protects them. The warning in a footstep, the kindness in a voice, the comfort of knowing when laughter isn't meant for you. Lee didn't have that comfort. Her world was shaped by what she saw, not what she heard, eyes tracing lips, hands, and movement, trying to guess the meaning behind it all. The little device behind her ear helped her bridge the gap, but not always. Some days it made her feel closer. Other days it reminded her how far she still was. And yet she smiled. She always smiled, until cruelty noticed her. Because in every hallway there's always someone who decides different means weak. And that day, when their laughter turned to hands, when they reached for what gave her sound, someone else was listening. Someone who they couldn't afford to mess with, and he took kindness to a whole new level. Before we continue, thank you for taking a moment to be here, to feel these stories, not just watch them. What we tell here isn't about heroes or headlines. It's about the quiet kind of courage, the kind that keeps standing even when the world goes quiet around it. If you've ever been misunderstood, overlooked, or laughed at for something that makes you different, this story is for you. Because sometimes, the people who say the least carry the loudest strength. And sometimes, it takes one person, calm, steady, unshakable, to remind the world that kindness should never need a voice to be heard. Morning came in quiet pieces for Lee. Light first, thin, winter-pale stripes slipping past the curtains and laying themselves across her desk. Then the shape of her room coming alive, posters, books stacked in soft towers, the sketch of a kestrel she'd been working on taped above her lamp. Finally, the ritual. She sat up, rubbed the heel of her palm beneath each eye, and reached for the small case on her nightstand. Inside, her Cochlear processors lay like delicate commas. She always paused before lifting them, part habit, part reverence. They were small, almost weightless, but they carried entire cities of sound on their backs. She brushed her thumb over the curve of one device, then clipped it behind her ear. The magnet found its place. A soft hum bloomed, the world moving from cotton to clarity. Not perfect, never perfect, but enough. "Morning star," her mother said from the doorway, forming the words with careful lips and warm eyes even though Lee was already connected. It had always been like that between them, speech and sign, voice and glance walking side by side. Lee smiled, held up 2 fingers, 2 minutes, then slid the second processor into place. She stood, palms smoothing the duvet, the way she did every day. Patterns and order coaxed her into calm. Downstairs, the kitchen wore its usual expression. A radio mumbling news like faraway traffic. A kettle's thin scream fading as her mother clicked it off. A note stuck to the fridge with a magnet in the shape of a cherry. 9 p.m. shift, leftovers in the blue container. Call me if the wind is too much for the bus. Love, M. Lee read it twice, just to feel the shape of being cared for. Her phone vibrated with a message from her best friend, Amya. "Locker meet. I brought the good muffins. Don't be late or I will publicly shame you with carbs." Lee grinned, typed back a single heart, and tucked the phone away. The walk to school was all winter breath and tired trees. The processors translated the world into texture. The scuff of her boots on salt, the laughter of kids somewhere behind her, a dog's bark bouncing off the brick of a corner store. Sounds didn't always come cleanly. Sometimes they were puzzles with missing pieces. But after years of practice, she could fill the gaps. Lips, eyes, shoulders. Body language was its own language, and she was fluent. At the crosswalk, a car idled, the driver's fingers drumming on the wheel. A bicyclist streaked by, tires hissing like a secret. Lee pulled her scarf higher and rehearsed the day inside her head. Math quiz. Art room at lunch. Leave 5 minutes early for speech therapy. She breathed in, breathed out, counted to 4. Control what you can, her therapist always said. Let the rest pass by like weather. Inside the school, the hallway air was a different kind of cold, metallic and busy. Lockers clanged with that exact locker slam sound she'd heard 1,000 times. Principal Walter's voice murmured somewhere near the office, steady as a ceiling fan. The fluorescent hum pressed at the edges, a gentle swarm that never really left. Amya found her at the lockers, as promised, wielding 2 chocolate chip muffins like weapons. "Breakfast," she announced, then signed with quick fingers. "Teacher meeting ran long. Mr. D looked stressed. You okay?" Lee lifted her shoulder, "Fine," and took a muffin. "Thanks." Her voice came lighter than she felt, every syllable placed like a careful step. She had been practicing less self-correction lately, letting the words be the way they wanted to be. The processors helped, but there was always that half-second delay, that blurred edge where sound met brain and asked to be trusted. Amya leaned in. You look like you didn't sleep. Just thinking, Lee said. About the audition. Lee's mouth tilted. Maybe. The school was staging a small winter concert, nothing dramatic, just a collection of choir pieces, a few student solos, a string quartet that had been practicing since October. The choir director had asked Lee if she would consider reading a poem between sets. She said she'd think about it, then spent the week not thinking about anything else. You'd be brilliant, Amya said, reading her face. And if anyone makes a face, I will personally rearrange it. Lee laughed a brief burst, surprised it was in her throat. Please don't assault the tenors. No promises. They parted at the stairwell, Amya veering toward science, Lee toward math. The first 2 periods were uneventful in the way good mornings often are, a blur of notes and graphs. The teacher's mouth synced carefully with the words on his screen. She picked her seat intentionally weeks ago. Second row, left side, clear line of sight to the board. Tiny decisions, big difference. Between classes, the hallway swelled. Noise stacked in layers, friends telling stories over each other, the wet squeak of a custodian's mop, a basketball knocking rhythmically against a hip as someone ran late to gym. Lee moved through it like a fish through current, small, intentional motions, head down, hair brushed forward when she didn't want to be recognized. At her locker, she felt it before she heard it, a shift in air, a pause she recognized like an old scar. She turned a fraction too slowly. Ty and Nalan, always together, always a little too eager, like they were waiting for someone to hand them permission to be worse. Hey Lee, Ty said. He over-enunciated, the way people sometimes did when they wanted to be cruel and pretend they were being kind. How robot ears. Nalan snorted, bro, that's not even funny. Ty grinned, it's a little funny. Lee's shoulders tightened. She pulled her locker door wider, a small wall. Please move, she said, voice calm, hands too still. Nalan leaned against the locker 2 down, watching her with that bored, floaty look of someone who did bad things to feel something. You need help hearing the bell. I can yell. I'm fine, she said. She kept her eyes on the shelf, on the neat row of notebooks, on the small folded paper where she'd written the lines of the poem she hadn't yet agreed to read. Hey, Ty said, voice an inch louder. He pointed to her left processor bright against her hair. New model, looks expensive. Lee felt her throat close. She was not ashamed of her implants. She knew what they were worth, had counted fundraisers, appointments, the way her mother's jaw had set when the insurance company said no and then said no again. But she also knew hands. She recognized their weight when they came toward her face. Don't touch me, she said, stepping back, heat rising like someone had opened a door inside her chest. Oh, relax, Ty said, palms up, some mockery of innocence. We're just talking. Nalan's eyes slid over her jeans, her backpack, her worn sneakers. Do you even hear normal, or is it like mixed-up robot sounds? Lee closed her locker softly, held the strap of her backpack in her fist, and started to move. Their bodies shifted like doors closing. Excuse us, she said, head angled to catch their mouths. Her processors hummed, the hallway noise blurred and sharpened in cycles, a laughter spike, a teacher calling someone back, the squeal of a locker hinge. Whoa, she said, excuse us, Ty said, mimicking her cadence. Polite. Nalan laughed, do the voice again. That's enough, came another voice. Its tone didn't snap or bark, it simply landed with weight. Mr. Dempsey, her art teacher, waited at the end of the row, hand on a stack of canvases. He stood like a man who'd learned to be soft on purpose. Ty and Nalan straightened. Teachers made them behave as long as teachers were looking. You too late for class? Mr. Dempsey asked. Ty flashed his practice smile, just going. Then go, Mr. Dempsey said, his mouth calm but his eyes not playing. He waited until they moved, until the bell dislodged the hallway into motion again, before turning to Lee. You all right, Ms. Morgan? Lee nodded, I'm fine, thank you. He hesitated. He knew what fine meant. Still, he didn't push. You know the art room's open at lunch if you need quiet. I know, she meant it. The art room was a greenhouse in winter, thank you. By third period, the heat in her cheeks had cooled. By fourth, she could breathe without tasting metal. At lunch, She slipped into the art room and let the door fold softly shut behind her. The room smelled like acrylic and wood shavings. Sun pooled in rectangles on the floor. Brushes lined up like small soldiers along the sink. Mr. Dempsey glanced up from a student sketch and nodded her toward an easel he'd set near the window. She unrolled her pencils. Lines steadied her. Lines didn't talk back. On the paper, the kestrel from her bedroom took shape, angles of wing and eye, that fierce, certain tilt of a head that trusted air. She drew until the edges of her thoughts softened. She didn't notice when the door opened again. She barely noticed when the air changed. "Excuse me," someone said from the doorway, voice low, British edges rounding it into something clean. Lee's head lifted instinctively, eyes searching for a mouth. A man stood with the principal, broad-shouldered, plain black jacket, that stillness some people wore like another kind of breath. He glanced around the room without impatience, and the art room, usually a world apart, suddenly felt connected to something larger. "This is Mr. Hale," Principal Walters said, forming the words carefully with his mouth. She always did that for Lee. She did it for other students too, practicing inclusion like a craft. "He's here to consult on building safety upgrades. He'll be in and out today." Mr. Dempsey stood, shook the man's hand. "We're safe, we have art." He smiled, he always did when nervous, and the principal laughed politely. The man, Mr. Hale, returned the smile with a dip of his chin and a glance across the room that caught Lee for a fraction of a second. He didn't stare, just noticed. Then the adults were gone, their footsteps stitching the hallway back together. Lee exhaled. Her processors recorded the sounds and delivered them like weather reports she could choose to ignore. The afternoon rolled. In English, she caught the rhythm of poetry with the ease of someone who listened with her eyes. In physics, she scribbled formulas and drew tiny birds in the margins, a private rebellion against gravity. The day felt almost ordinary again. And then last period came. History in the old wing where the fluorescent buzz was a half-step harsher and the heater banged like a furnace with opinions. She took her seat near the front. The teacher, a good one if chronically disorganized, began a lecture on migration patterns and economic pressure. Lee followed, mapping words to lips, grateful for the teacher's tendency to face the class when she spoke. Halfway through, the intercom crackled. "Lockdown drill in 5 minutes," the office said. Groans swept the room like wind. The teacher sighed, checked the clock, continued. When the drill began, the class moved through the motions. Lights off, blinds down, students clustered away from the door in a knot that smelled faintly of gum and detergent. Lee tucked herself along the wall, back to cinderblock, bag under her knees. In the hush, she could hear breath, shifts of fabric, a stifled cough. She could see mouths whisper, could not hear the words. It was always like this, safety wrapped in silence, her processors half useless when the room tried to be soundless. The drill ended. Relief loosened the room. The lights came back. Chairs scraped. The heater banged its opinion twice. The teacher clapped softly, her mouth forming, "Thank you, everyone," then turned back to the board. When the bell for dismissal finally rang, students poured into the hallway with the pent-up energy of small animals released from cages. Friday could be seen from here. Lee slipped to the side, waited for the wave to pass, then aimed for her locker to switch out her books before therapy. Ty and Nolan were there waiting. Not straight on, off to the side. Casual spread of bodies like a speed bump you pretend is part of the road. The hallway narrowed without actually getting smaller, a trick she'd learned to spot too late or just in time. She considered turning around. The thought moved across her face, and Ty read it like a cue. "Lee," he said, too friendly, stepping into her path. "Quick question. Does the robot turn off if I do this?" His hand lifted, not fast, not yet. Lee's chest went ice. "Don't," she said, loud enough to hear herself. "I said that before." Nolan laughed like he'd been handed a script. "We're just curious. Science, right?" A cluster of students slowed, watched. Some exchanged looks that said not again. Some kept moving, the human preference for not being called upon. "I need to go," Lee said. She looked for gaps, spaces between shoulders, a teacher's jacket in the distance. On the far end of the hall, Principal Walters turned out of sight, pulled toward some crisis with a copy machine. A custodian pushed a cart around the corner. A door closed down the hall with that school door thunk that always sounded a tad final. "Show us," Ty said, smile wide and wrong. "Does it beep? Does it spark? Come on." He reached again. Lee swatted his hand away, shock moving up her arm like heat. Don't, she said. I mean it. The word mean flickered something in Ty's face. Maybe he hadn't meant to be anything worse than the person he already was. Maybe he had. Either way, pride lined up behind him like a cheer squad. Nolan's eyes sharpened. He wanted a moment to tell later in a voice that made him feel tall. Ty's hand came close. Lee ducked, turned her head, brought her shoulder up to shield the processor the way the audiologist had taught her years ago. Protective reflex, like covering your heart in a storm. Leave her, someone said down the hall. The words didn't belong to a teacher. They didn't have the cadence of a student. They were steady as a plumb line. Ty didn't hear it or pretended he didn't. His fingers brushed Lee's hair, slid against the processor's edge. The magnet held. He pinched reflexively, found, purchased, tugged. The world stuttered. The processor popped free, sound in that ear falling to shadow so suddenly it made Lee's stomach drop. She gasped, hand flying up, but Ty already had it, surprise and triumph arriving together. Whoa, he said, holding it between thumb and forefinger like a beetle. Tiny, how much is this? Like 1,000. Nolan whistled, more. Give it back, Lee said. The words came too quick, broken at the edges. Her right ear tried to make sense of the hallway on its own. She stepped forward, palm up. Ty, please. He danced a half-step backward, stupid, grinning. Relax, we're looking. Nolan leaned in, curiosity sharp as a blade. What happens if? Don't, Lee said again, but the word was small now. Her chest pulled tight. She could hear the hum of lights and the vague ocean of voices. The details were gone. Lips moved too fast, too far. She felt the throb at the base of her skull, panic's foot starting to tap. Give it, she said, reaching. Ty flinched, sudden, guilty, and the processor slipped. It tumbled in the air, glinting once in the fluorescent light like a small fish, then hit the linoleum. The sound wasn't loud, but it was exact, and it made something behind Lee's ribs split. Nolan laughed. Oh, he said, like a child at a window. Lee dove, hand outstretched, but a sneaker came down first. Not hard, not a stomp, a thoughtless coward's press. Plastic cracked. A tiny piece skittered under the row of lockers and disappeared. The hallway didn't go silent. It tilted. The hum turned into a fog. Fear rearranged her bones. She grabbed the broken shape, it was still warm, and cradled it in both hands. All that engineering, all that hope, all those appointments heaped into something fragile and complicated now shattered into a handful of sharp edges. Her throat worked, but the sound caught there. Please tried to come and failed. She looked up, chest heaving, vision narrowing, and saw faces. Some shocked, some entertained, some frozen in that middle distance where responsibility goes to die. What did you do? Someone breathed from the side. Nothing, Ty snapped, harsh with panic, eyes wide. He stared at the damage like it had betrayed him by being real. Nolan's smirk twitched, uncertain. Pick it up, a new voice said. Calm, not loud. It parted the air like a steady hand. Lee turned toward the sound without meaning to. She didn't have to find the mouth to read this sentence. It carried its own shape. Down the hall, a man stepped out from the shadow of the stairwell, black jacket, unhurried stride, the same stillness she'd felt hours before in the art room. He had not rushed. He had arrived. Students made a path without realizing they were making one. His gaze moved once over Ty, once over Nolan, then down to Lee's hands. He didn't look up at the ceiling or look around for witnesses. He didn't ask questions he already knew the answers to. Pick it up, he said again, softer, eyes on the shoe that still hovered inches from the broken device. Now. Ty's mouth opened. Whatever he was about to say evaporated. He lifted his foot, slow, like the linoleum might complain. The man didn't look away. He didn't need to. Lee's skin prickled with a strange, sudden warmth, like stepping into sunlight after a long shade. Her right ear caught a small sound she couldn't place at first. Later, she realized it was the noise a hallway makes when it forgets how to laugh. The custodian's cart squeaked into view at the far corner and stopped. Mr. Dempsey's classroom door opened halfway and held there. Jasonstatham reached the last few feet in 3 even steps and crouched beside Lee, not touching her, simply entering the small circle of her fear without taking it over. Up close, his voice was even lower, less a sound than a presence wearing words. Give me your hand, he said. She did. He lifted her palm an inch, just enough to make space to see what was broken and what could still be saved. His attention didn't leave the device, but his presence didn't leave her either. He looked up once at Ty, not angry, not theatrical. Just the quiet math of a man deciding who needed to learn what and how. "Apologize," he said. The bell hadn't rung, the day hadn't ended, but something in the hallway had. Lee held the shattered shape between her fingers and waited for the rest of the sentence, for the rest of whatever this moment was going to become. And the boys, for the first time all year, didn't know whether to run.